there's so much power in learning what muscles do what. Once you know the function of muscles, you can then look at, okay, I want to target this muscle, but the movement I want to do is busy. I need to find a movement that aligns with its primary function. So it does this function, therefore all of these movements do that. I can pick and choose any of them. Today, somebody we've never spoken about before, but somebody who has actually been asked about for quite some time. I just haven't got around to him till now. We're looking at Chris, and it's a home workout, which I know applies to a lot of you, but it's a shoulder workout, which is particularly difficult without equipment, and we're going to see why very shortly. Despite this being in the description of every video, I'll probably address it for the 100th time, is that there is a reason why I primarily speak about women. If you look at my demographics, which I can show you publicly if you so wish, the vast majority of my audience are women, and a lot of my videos come from audience suggestion, so put two and two together. But now that's cleared up, and I'm sure I'm still going to be labelled a misogynist regardless, we're going to talk about Chris and his shoulder workout. If you want to get a piece of clothing, get on the mailing list, because the t-shirt is coming out on Monday, but it goes live for the people on the mailing list on Sunday, so you don't want to miss out, so get on it, tfnl.uk. The other thing, if at any point throughout this entire video you actually just learned something from the video, I would appreciate it if you did subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot. I need some friends. Movements like this are going to definitely burn the shoulders, because you're essentially using the shoulders for support here. Cool tattoos, can't respect it. But the issue is, they don't really go through a sufficient range of motion to actively work them, so it depends how you define workout. In my eyes, when looking at like working a muscle, again, as described in the description, I primarily speak about doing so from the context of hypertrophy. So building that muscle, one of the most effective ways to do that is going to be by performing movements through a relevant range of motion, which this doesn't align with. But it will certainly burn them. But as I mentioned many times before, just because it's hurting doesn't necessarily mean it's working effectively. This one I actually kind of back to an extent, because again, you see what he's doing here, which is going through some scapular retraction, and he's mimicking that end portion of a rear delt fly, which I actually respect, especially as he's aligning the elms at about 45 degrees or so, my preference when performing rear delt movements. But again, considering there's no equipment, this is actually quite a creative way of at least getting some rear delt stimulus through somewhat of a range of motion. So I'm actually going to respect this and appreciate this. I wouldn't have thought of that, so he's better than me. And again, this is something I would often include if we are doing a home workout where shoulders are something you want to specifically look at. I would always include something like a pike push-up where you are essentially adopting somewhat of a shoulder press. The biggest limitation here is range of motion. So what you can do is plant your hands on some kind of elevation like books, provided they don't slip, or something along those lines, just to help you go through a greater range of motion. Because if you're like me and have an unnecessarily oversized head, your range of motion is actually going to be particularly limited. If you have a normal sized head, it might not be as limited. And you can actually alter bias here slightly. When your hands are a bit closer together and the elbows are maybe traveling slightly more in front of you, maybe 45 degrees, it will shift a bit more emphasis to the front of the shoulders. If you take a bit of a wider grip and stick the elbows out a bit more, it will shift some emphasis to the side of the shoulders. So front, we're looking at anterior, side, we're looking at lateral. High side plank raises similar to the first movement here, which is where, yes, they will burn, but the range of motion is very limited. Sure, you are going to get some abduction here where the elbow is lifting slightly, so the delts will be involved to an extent, but this is primarily going to shift a bit more emphasis over to the obliques. So I would say, which is what he's not done here, if you are going to do movements one side at a time, I think it's really important to rest between sides. Because if you don't rest between sides and go straight in from, let's say, left side to right side, the fatigue accumulated on the first side is going to carry over to the second side, which wasn't present during the first side. So for example, if I do like a dumbbell shoulder press, one arm at a time, I do my set of 8, then I finish it, I'm a bit out of breath. That fatigue, that respiratory fatigue I'm now experiencing was not present throughout the whole of that first side, but it's now going to be present and even added to during the second side. There's also the argument of motor unit recruitment as well. So there is the chance that going from side to side may encourage some potential imbalances where the first side may develop at a slightly faster rate than the second side. If you already have imbalances, you can just go straight into it because it might even things out. But I would always say start with your weakest side, and it's probably best, depending on imbalances, to rest between sides. Again, movements like this, there is going to be some movement for the shoulders when looking, it's almost like somewhat of a front raise variation. So yes, they are going to be worked to an extent, but the drop off of resistance is quite aggressive as the bum starts coming up, which means the stimulation they're experiencing is probably not going to be as sufficient as you would like. But again, with the consideration that this is at home and there is no equipment, it's not a bad shout, and actually quite a creative shout at that. So again, I will give him this. You have to understand is at home, you're always going to be somewhat limited. And when looking at what people say, quote unquote, optimal movements or more effective movements for the development of certain muscles, you are going to have to sacrifice and make some compromises if you are limited to equipment. Because again, you don't have the luxury of having access to loads of different machines. You don't have the luxury of having access to loads of different dumbbells, barbells, racks, like whatever it may be. But what you can do is acquire some equipment. Bands are pretty inexpensive on the line. So getting a set of bands can suddenly give you a whole new array of movements you can do, and also allow you to actually progressively overload some of the bodyweight movements you were already doing by adding some banded resistance to them. Dumbbells are usually a bit more expensive. I think they're actually arguably a bit unnecessarily expensive, but if you can afford them, I've definitely said it's a fair shout if for whatever reason you do not want to acquire a gym membership. And then you look at the more expensive things like that, like getting a rack, getting a bar, which take up a lot of room. Not a lot of people have that much room to basically make a home gym. But I would say the best first investment is probably going to be a set of bands, because your arsenal of working out suddenly blows up. Which actually segues onto a couple of things. Whether you work out at home or at the gym doesn't matter, because if you click the link down below in the description, you've got a few things. You've got a link to apply to work with myself on a one-to-one coaching basis where I can help you achieve your goals, whatever they may be, wherever you may be in the world, and also regardless of whether that's at home or at the gym. You've also got the link to the TFNL workout guides, which are bloody phenomenal guides that tell you what to do, show you how to do it, and also tell you why you're doing it in the first place. And they're also pretty inexpensive too. They won't be around for too much longer. In the next coming months, all of the guides, every single one of them, is going to be gone forever. Completely wiped offline, they're never coming back. And there's a reason for that. You'll find out next year. And the last thing is obviously we've got the TFNL workout teams. So if you want to work out at home or at the gym, click the link down below. For less than $1 a day, you can follow a pretty splendid program I've created for both of those training environments. And you also get a message board where you can talk to me, you can send bits and bobs. It's fantastic. And there's a team you can work out alongside as well, which is pretty cool. I guess one of the big things that people struggle with when they're working out just in general is knowing what to do and what targets what. I said a couple of things earlier about just because it's burning doesn't mean it's working something effectively. And also whatever you're doing when really looking at building muscle needs to go through a relevant and appropriate range of motion. There's so much power in learning what muscles do what. We know that elbow flexion, so curling the elbows, is going to heavily work the biceps. That now gives you options to a vast array of movements that will target that specific area. If you're at the gym, for example, and your cable machine is broken so you can't do cable machine curls, you step away and say, okay, well, I was doing this motion because that's the motion I need to do for that muscle group. What can I do differently? Okay, well, I need to find another movement that does this. Okay, I've got dumbbells, I've got a barbell, I've got a different machine. Do you mean once you know the function of muscles, you can then look at, okay, I want to target this muscle, but the movement I want to do is busy. I need to find a movement that aligns with its primary function. So it does this function, therefore all of these movements do that. I can pick and choose any of them. It basically gives you so many options, especially when you are either limited for equipment, the gym's busy, things are broken, whatever it may be. So I would really look into actually learning basic anatomy because it can be so helpful. Thankfully, there's a whole bloody anatomy section in the growth guide, which tells you everything you need to know. So that's a little bit of an additional plug as well. But honestly, as a whole, this is actually a pretty solid workout. I didn't expect a lot, I'll be honest with you, because oftentimes when I look at home workouts, I am often met with a bit of disappointment. Not always, but often. But this caught me off guard, and I'll give it to him. Chris did pretty well here. I respect it. It doesn't mean I agree with everything, doesn't mean I align with everything. Better than expected, and I appreciate that. So perhaps I shall do further gandering in the future if desired. But as always, this is simply my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion in the comment section below. But also let me know in the comment section, do you work out at home or do you work out in the gym? But until the next one, thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my waffle about a topless man this time. And thank you for tolerating the video.